In 1803, fishermen were working in the Hitachi province on the eastern coast of Japan when something caught their eye. A strange vessel that appeared to be drifting. Perplexed and more than a little curious, they decided to tow the vessel back to land. Once back on the beach, the fishermen would have an encounter that has grown into legend. A legend that many people have tried to make sense of ever since. What was the Utsuro-bune? February 22nd, 1803. Fishermen on the coast of Hitachi province are out on the waters searching for a fresh catch. Throwing out nets into the water, they spot something drifting on the water's surface. A strange vessel, around 3 meters high and 5 meters wide, with a shape similar to that of a Japanese incense burner. Curious, they watched this vessel for a few moments before their curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to row out to the vessel and tow it back to land. The sand now beneath their shoes to get a better look at this odd vessel. It doesn't look like anything they had ever seen before. Now getting a closer look at it, it looks more like a rice cooking pot, but very advanced. The lower part of the vessel is covered with metal plates, while the upper part seemed to be made out of rosewood, with several windows made of glass or possibly crystal. These windows were all covered with bars and clogged with some kind of tree resin. The windows were transparent, but before the fishermen could even approach to take a look inside, a panel flung open on the hull, causing them all to back up. A sound akin to a hiss of released pressure was then heard before a figure emerged from within. Stepping out into the light of the morning sun was a young woman, around 18 or 20 years old, roughly 5 feet tall, with red hair that was elongated by artificial white extensions, pale pink or white skin. Her clothes were long and smooth, though the fabric was unfamiliar to them. The woman appeared to be friendly, if a little odd. When she spoke to them, it was in a strange language that none of them understood, and when they spoke to her, she didn't seem to understand them either. During the entire encounter, this woman was clutching a rectangular box that was made of some kind of pale material. She closely guarded this box, glaring at the men when they gestured towards it, refusing to let anyone get close. Brushing past the woman, the captain of the fishing ship decided to peek into the vessel. What he saw baffled him. The inside was decorated with texts or possibly symbols in a language that was completely unknown to him. He saw bed sheets, 2 soft carpets of unknown style and fabric, and he even saw a beautifully decorated cup with ornaments that no one could identify. He also spotted a bottle filled with water and supplies such as cake, kneaded food, and meat. All of this combined made the fishermen wonder just who was this woman, or more importantly, where did she come from? In later retellings, the fishermen also found a small board with a pinned head inside the vessel. This made the fishermen speculate if this woman was maybe a princess of a foreign realm who had to leave for whatever reason, fleeing an unhappy marriage, or maybe her lover was killed, and his head was what was inside the box that she so closely guarded. Speculation run wild. How the encounter ended differs depending on the version you're being told. In one variation of the story, the woman stays in the village where she would grow to old age. But in the more well-known variation of the tale, the villagers would lead her back to the vessel, placed her in it, and set it to drift away into the ocean once again. This variation of the tale does align with the situation in Japan at the time. This event was said to have taken place in 1803, which would have been during the Sakoko period. Sakoko is the most common name given to the isolationist foreign policy during the Edo period. It was enacted by the shogunate government through a number of edicts and policies from 1633 to 1639 and then stretched all the way up until 1868. During this time period, relations and trade between Japan and other countries were severely limited. More importantly, it meant that almost all foreign nationals were banned from entering Japan. The only European influence permitted was at a specific Dutch factory in Nagasaki. This meant that the villagers were actually legally required to set this woman back adrift. Just letting her come ashore at all was pushing it. So while that part of the story does make some sense, the rest of it has led to a lot of speculation. Ever since this legend or this story first appeared, there have been those who have attempted to make sense of it. And since the UFO connection is the one that brought the story to the forefront, let's start there. The description and, more importantly, the artistic renderings of the vessel from the sea from the era does resemble a classic depiction of a flying saucer. In fact, in some cases, it's even been argued that maybe the depiction of the Utsuro-bune is what inspired the depictions of the UFO as we know it today. Adding to that, you have the unknown origins of both the vessel as well as the woman. And finally, the strange markings that were seen on the vessel in some depictions. All of that combined means that there are those who argue that this legend could be one of the earliest cases of a documented close encounter of the third kind. Though in this case it would not be a UFO, an unidentified flying object, but rather a USO, an unidentified submerged object. Though the vessel was never submerged, but the point remains. Another thing that ufologists look at is the strange text that was supposedly seen inside the vessel. Some have speculated that maybe they were like the symbols that had been found on other strange UFO vessels, most famously the ones from the Rendlesham Forest incident. But like with anything else, there are of course other interpretations of this incident, ones that take a more earthly explanation for what happened. One of the more prominent ones ties into the Sakoko period that I mentioned before, with the strange woman simply being a foreigner. The first historical investigation of this incident was conducted in 1844, where it was suggested that both the vessel and the woman may have been Russian, pointing to the language, the clothes, the symbols, and the hairstyle as being traditionally Russian at that time. It's believed that this interpretation is based on the experiences of Daikokuya Kodayu during his time spent in Russia. Supposedly, during the time he was in Russia, there was a trend of dusting your hair with white powder. And even if there hadn't been a trend of that, hair powders were extremely important for styling hair, with wheat, potato, and rice starch being used throughout the 18th and 19th centuries to make that powder. The red hair and the clothes that the woman had is also said to be common among Europeans at that time, but very unusual for the very isolated Japanese. Other interpretations of the legend focus more on the vessel itself. In 1925 as well as 1962, historian Yanagita Kunio would also look into this legend, and he would point out that the vessel may not have been that strange, as circular boats were not unusual in Japan. But if they added Western-like details, then the vessel would seem more exotic. He also looked at other legends that are similar to that of the Utsuro-bune, pointing out that most of them all share the same details. A strange young woman is found inside a circular boat, with the story concluding with her either getting rescued or sent back to the ocean. Kunio also points to some inconsistencies with the legend, namely that the eldest versions of this legend describe humble, circular, and open logboats without any kind of dome atop them. So he argues that the details of the brazen plates and the windows made of glass or crystal were added later due to the skepticism regarding the seaworthiness of a logboat on the high seas, meaning that those details were added later to address some criticisms about this story. Another investigation was done in 1997 by Dr. Katsuo Tanaka, Japanese professor for computer and electronics engineering from Gifu University at Tokyo. He investigated the original scripts, and he reached the conclusion that this tale was a mixture of folklore and imagination, and he would base a lot of these assumptions on the 1925 investigations. This is where the Sakoko period comes back into the picture. Both Tanaka and Yanagita would come to the conclusion that the setting in which this legend takes place is very important in trying to understand it, both in terms of the isolationist laws of the time, but also the fact that people were afraid of bad cultural influences from the Western world. And another interesting factor is that the people of the Edo period also had an interest in the paranormal, which makes the existence of this strange and exotic boat not that surprising. Dr. Tanaka also found that the beaches where this was said to take place doesn't exist. There is no evidence of them, nor any mention of a foreigner landing on Japanese shore in official records. Now we have the box that this woman was guarding, and that is believed to have been inspired by something that we see in the real world, such as one of the boxes that a wandering miko would be carrying. Wandering miko are a historical variety of miko, or Shinto priestesses, who made their living by traveling around Japan, praying, ordaining, or advocating. The box that they carry is believed to contain many magical items. The woman's red hair also ties into the isolationist attitude of Japan at the time. Red hair was connected to demons and European foreigners. So giving her red hair was a way to illustrate her otherness, while at the same time giving her things that are familiar to Japanese people is a way for them to relate to the story. You know the symbols that were said to be found inside the vessel? Well, according to author Hideki Sato, they were very similar to alchemical symbols, which were commonly used in Edo period Japan. So where are we at with this story? A strange UFO-USO encounter, or a European that washed up on Japanese shores at a time where the country was strict about keeping to themselves? This legend is an interesting one. If it is just a tale, it points to a very specific time in Japanese history, with details of foreigners, demons, and even familiar things like rice cooking pots. The similarities with traditional UFO depictions have made some wonder if the depiction of this legend is what played a part in how UFOs are depicted today. If we believe or even agree with the interpretation that this legend is simply based on an encounter with a European woman with details added on in subsequent retellings, then that adds another layer of otherness when looking at it from UFO angle. Instead of a foreigner from another land, this woman is a being from an entirely different world, planet even. I'll leave it up to you now. What do you think this woman was? Do you think this event even happened? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.